Aloha. This video I wanted to just share a quick thought or a thing that I had been observing over the years but had only put to words recently in a conversation with a friend. The idea of, we can understand the identity of the angry black man that's used as a way to label and control a discussion, a situation, a dialogue, the narrative, so on and so forth. But what we don't discuss a lot of the times are a lot of the other narrative, dialogue, controller mechanisms that are out there. What I was saying is the figurative opposite of the angry black man is the overly nice and caring and concerning white man, which is actually the most dangerous individual out there right now, which is why the angry black man persona exists in the first place. So this was confirmed, not confirmed, but just brought back up into my attention after watching this video that you're looking at right now with these two guys that are on here, this Dave Foley and the other guy, this Canadian guy. I think they're both Canadian, but this overly, you know, the Canadians are known for being really nice people. Well, I've been saying over and over again, a lot of that personification, a lot of that exists in order to distract from the fact that that land was stolen, and it's still bleeding in many different ways. But the storyline is Canadians are just really nice people. So people who push the mainstream narrative, like Joe Rogan, have these individuals on here to push the mainstream narrative. So what are they talking about? Obviously the UFO, Sasquatch, Area 51, New Age agenda at best. But what gets pushed to your subconscious is the intellectual, nice European man as a leader in intellect. That's a thing. It's the same way your National Geographic, Discovery Channel, Planet Earth, Blue Planet documentaries, all these documentaries are done with an English accent in order to have an effect on you. This is not just a coincidence. It's a colonial putting to sleep, rocking you to sleep. Your colonial intellectual slave master rocking you to sleep. This was the actual relationship that I had. I was raised in this kind of mentality where my favorite thing were nature books, all the animal books, and nature videos, so all the Nova, the nature shows, National Geographic. I wanted to watch that stuff all the time. That was what interested me. As a kid, I was watching that more than cartoons a lot of the times. So just hours and hours and hours of that PBS type of information. So as I got older, I started to realize, why do all these, who is this, why is it always one kind of voice going on? And then you start to see the other documentaries and so-called informative TV shows, why they exist in the first place. Largely all mind control, a lot of the universe, or all of the universe television shows, they're all meant to affect you a certain way. So anyway, to keep a focus, because that's part of it. That is not leaving the point. That's a big part of it. But as far as the observation of the overly nice white man. So you got the angry black man, that's a label to control, but a label to observe and to really put things into perspective is the overly nice white man, because this is something that we don't really recognize and pay attention to, but it is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, subconscious mind controls that's out there. It's on Netflix. It's within the construct of Netflix, the algorithms of Netflix. So you see Facebook and all this other stuff. This is the language of the heliocentric universe. Like, the belief system comes from the belief in the intellect. Like, the intellect of having evolved from being a human consciousness based upon war and destruction, now being based upon space discovery and the inventions, and, you know, monkeys from beating shit up to, you know, going to Mars in a red sports car on top of a, you know, phallic rocket ship. So this is that movie. This is still Hollywood that's being played. And that's why I said, when people fall into the trap of, with the specifics of what Joe Rogan and Owen Benjamin and Alex Jones are talking about, we miss a lot of the whole points of our power exists, our self-empowerment exists within observing the nature of the board itself, the system itself, the matrix itself, the grid itself, how it affects us on a macro scale. If we keep getting consumed by the little shit, this is why I do my best to break down how and why these mind controls affect us, rather than like talking. It's like somebody asked me about, like, what do you think about the R. Kelly thing? And I'm like, I've already broken that stuff down a ways back, and that goes into like the addressing of the pedophilic consciousness overall existing in the Hollywood, that relationship with the church, that relationship with the military or the government, the politics, that whole thing. It's all one big underground group. So, and that's another thing. I think Joe Rogan is from Boston, and I just wanted to just throw this in as a little tangent. As far as like talking points and abilities to speak on issues, there's this movie or documentary on Netflix called Spotlight, which shines a light on the underground pedophile rings connected to the Catholic Church, specifically in Boston, that pretty much just got washed over. Nothing really came of it, and that's really just another kind of like storyline that I wanted to relate to this whole Joe Rogan storyline, because he did not only turn his back on like the moon landing being, you know, fake, and now saying it's real and all that other stuff. But if you really break down like everything he's not paying attention to, because like I said, when I approach flat earth, it ain't got really shit to do with like a model or like people believing or anything. It's about the lie itself and the power that came from that lie. So the people who are protecting the lie are not giving a shit about the model. Well, you think they're giving a shit about the model? No, they're being paid to protect the lie itself and the power behind the lie. And they're not. You think they really are vested personally in, like, because the globe is their favorite screensaver on their laptop or some shit? No, these assholes are protecting the power behind the lie. That's a whole different story, a whole different approach. So even the approach flat earthers, so-called flat earthers, have to this storyline with the whole flat versus globe thing already sets you up for a disempowered position, because you're not really addressing the power itself. You can put yourself in a position of power by addressing the lie itself. But as soon as you start saying flat versus globe, which is what was manipulated by these midstream truthers, this so-called flat earth community, once you break that shit, you can start to decipher like all this, the way these systems work. So I just wanted to share that in a quick little video, this overly nice white man, there's an angry black man that was obviously generated with this beastly. That's another thing. See, the angry black man was also invented to protect, to be as a contrast to the overly nice white man in this colonial universe. So this is why it's so important to put these pieces together. This is why I'm saying, like, why are people running from this discussion as if it won't be made in the future? This discussion is going to be made. Your ancestral relationship, our ancestral relationship to the powers of today will be discussed. So people defending or running away from this part of the truth as if it doesn't exist is really just absurd on so many levels. And what I've been saying for these last few years will be more obvious when you look back at this whole so-called community of truthers and flat earthers, this whole group of people who really, when you boil it all down, when you distill everything all out, what did they really do? They just repeated themselves. They repeated the earth is flat and that is that for 3 years straight. And you see how long, like how much potential could have like was in that space of time from getting the story more complex than just priding yourself in realizing this illusion, this heliocentric illusion. It no longer affects you anymore. Like, there's so many different places that that's what really kind of pissed me off, was that the different potentials that could have come from expanding the conversation out of the just like, hey, we're right, you know, hey, you know, flat smacking people, like, what the fuck, man? This is some. And like I said, I don't want to be coming off as like coming down on people for doing what it is that they're doing. Like I'm saying, like, I'm just sharing my experience, just like how I wouldn't think or do some of the things that I would do when I was in that thought process of being in the Occupy movement time frame, when I was running around in Occupy San Francisco and then in Occupy Oakland. Like, when all those things were coming about, that was like my world. That was my biggest approach to what was going on in the world and society. That was my biggest investment in at that time that I could do. Dedicate my time, dedicate my my knowledge, my presence, my perspective, my security, like watching out over people that I care about, like that whole thing, like that was the most on point thing that I could ever do. So there's nothing that. So the point is that now my engagement in the overall storyline is still coming from the same space, but it's from a deeper kind of thread that is involving a whole bunch of different storylines that don't necessarily waste. Excuse me. Another thing is there's a lot of wasted energy that comes from actually empowering a system by like yelling at it. That's one of the biggest things that I learned from the so-called Occupy movement was it's like, what are you really yelling at? Like, what are we protesting? Like, just by protesting, you're not really inhabiting your own real power. And your perspective is very linear. Like, you're only... it's easy to get pigeonholed into this linear consciousness, when the overall, if your approach is forever growing, then it's not as linear as empowering the people and excuse me, the system in the first place. So you kind of outgrow the consciousness of your biggest investment, like what it you were perceiving that reality to be, and you constantly keep expanding, but you never lose connections with what that you actually make the connections deeper. So now I understand from a deeper layer. I don't look down on myself in the Occupy movement. I actually kind of feel, don't kind of, but actually definitely feel like good about myself from having been involved in that, because that was the best that I could do. That was the best that I could involve myself in. So, and then it affected other people too. Like we were feeding people. There was like at the peak, there was like a daycare down there. People were, you know, sleeping. They were saying all kinds of shit about how there were rats down there and all this other stuff. But there were already like rats down. We actually, when you pay attention to it, this is the thing. There were no cameras down there before. It was tents down there. And then, so there were no cameras to see the rats that was there because the city wasn't cleaning shit up down there. But they didn't, so they don't even record the rats that were on the city hall lawn before Occupy popped off. But now they got cameras going over there to get on Occupy. Now they want to talk about how it was. But they only caught it in the beginning because once the people started going there, the people started cleaning the area up, and actually the pests that were in the area scattered off because now people were living there because the people were the pests now. So yeah, that's just the whole spin of that whole world that's out there. But you start to see the empowerment there. Like when me and my brother had our tent out there, and then they came in, you know, and with all the police and just, you know, ripped everything to shreds and just dumped everything and basically evicted everybody off of the city hall front lawn. Like you start asking yourself, like, what, this is some childish shit. Like those are some little like kids out there, and like seriously looking directly in their faces. Like I'm just getting out of the military, at that time for the second time. So I'm a little bit older than some of the people who were, you know, even leaders in the military. So I'm seeing some of these faces. These are faces of soldiers, but they're just like, you know, police officers now, you know, standing guard, riot control for the Occupy protesters now. You looking at them right in their faces because they got to stand there with their visors down and everything, and people are like yelling and all that other shit, but I'm looking at them right in their faces. At times I was talking and yelling at times, but always saying something of some kind of, you know, something. But you look at their faces and, you know, a lot of these people are kids. They're just like, they don't know what the fuck is going on. They don't know nothing from Dookie on a stick. It's just, yeah, it's just, that whole world is, it's kind of like the military. It's like, where does your authority come from? Where's your power come from? So anyway, this is something that I wanted to put out there now because it's a good kind of jump off from some of the previous videos that I've shared, but taking another perspective that's very obvious and that a lot of people don't pay attention to or care to acknowledge. Which is not really frustrating. It used to be frustrating. It's just kind of curious now that a lot of this stuff doesn't get addressed. But yeah, we talk a lot about, we know about the angry black man, but we don't talk about the overly nice and overly concerned white man. That this is the overly nice, overly concerned white man is the core of gentrification. is the core of colonialism, is the core of the blonde hair, blue eyed Jesus program, the white supremacy program. Like, it's the overly, like, we are the best, we are the best. Like, you can go all, you can connect this all the way throughout this, however you want to go. But it's in everything. Just think about it now. You won't be able to not see it in everything now. It's on your television. It's on your radio. It is the mainstream media. It is the midstream media. It's the Bernie Sanders of human consciousness. It's the bullshit. It's the shit glue that holds this whole thing, the hope together, this bullshit hope together. The old hope was Barack Obama. The new hope is taking that kind of idea of change to the system now. So they'll try to get maybe a woman in there to do the transitioning of the system now, and then you think it's changing you. No, they're just going from the iPhone 8 or 9 to the iPhone X or 10 or whatever they call this shit now. It's just the same thing. You're getting a new iPhone, they go from so-called capitalism to democratic socialism, or whatever the hell they want to call it, or democracy to a democratic socialist, whatever. It's all a drive-through McDonald's, Walmart consciousness. And hope for the best. And since people believe in the so-called progress, the innovation of this evolution of the monkey evolution program, and they watch these assholes like Joe Rogan, and I think this is the dude from the Kids in the Hall. I think he's one of the old school Kids in the Hall comedians. This is an old HBO thing, like comedy, sketch comedy TV show. But yeah, I think I made my point. The overly nice white man is, yeah. Well, what do people think about that in the comment section? I'd like to see, because this is a theme. The angry black man, and the same thing with the angry black woman. That's even it's a character portrayed, and the overly nice and concerned white man is portrayed also. I'm not gonna say it's not portrayed. Is also portrayed in Hollywood too. These characters are portrayed, but what I'm saying is that how are we not? Can the discussion be made to expand upon the effect of the overly nice white man? Take it to the extremes. Colonialism. Take it to the extremes. Gentrification. What that means. Redlining. The Homestead Act. The head right system. This is once you break that down, that is the definition of so-called white privilege, or the infrastructure. That's the nuts and bolts of what you would call white privilege. And it's the first few steps up the ladder of realizing, you know, what real white supremacy is and what it's connected to, because white supremacy is just a subcategory of a bigger control grid. That's what a lot of people don't really understand when I mention it. I mention it very often because there's a defense program up against it. So if I see something up against it, like people don't want to talk about it, what the fuck you think I'm going to do? I'm going to make you talk about it. Because it's something that needs to be spoken about. It needs to be, if I feel it needs to be spoken about, and it's something that's obvious to me and my world and people that I know for my entire life, and you know, people are like, that doesn't exist. Get it, that's poppycock. You're just an angry, get the fuck. You're divisive. You're not talking about unity. I'm like, oh my goodness, how many things, which way do I approach this shit now? So that's that whole thing. It's like, goodness gracious, what is everything? Like, they just kind of incomprehensible hopelessness, just this whole like, where do we start? It's like, they can't really comprehend. It's like, does not compute. How can we? hold on to the system, but let go at the same. They can't really see it. So it's easy. It's actually very attractive for an individual in that space to focus only on the science of flat Earth and glorify it. It's pretty much like the only thing to focus on. What else is there? I mean, people are going to start doing it now, but at that time in the beginning, you know, it's such a shock. So you can see this was glorified in the Behind the Curve documentary. So I'm just kind of like breaking down loosely how a lot of this stuff works, so people can see more easily. Like a lot of these, I don't even have to play any of this Joe Rogan video. You already know. The fact that the Joe Rogan's podcast is #1 out there is a testament to this system being alive and well. Think about it. It's control. Now look at the Oscars. Why is there even a hashtag for white Oscars? Why is there a thing like that? Why is any of this stuff existing? So now that it exists, you can look at the science. You can look at the psychology of it. It's not, you could do that. It's okay. Now that you see it, it's okay. You can look at it now. You can break it down. You can talk about it. Like, people get scared of this shit. I'm like, no, you got to look at this shit, you know, put it up there, look at it, get inside and get that shit out of there. So, yeah, these individuals are keeping those stories alive every day. Every single day. That's pretty much it for this video. That's all I wanted to do. I thought I was going to keep it short. It's probably like 30 minutes. But, yeah, please start to include this in the discussion. This kind of stuff needs to be broken down because, like, only now are people starting to see, like, kind of the kickback or the flack that even talking about this stuff, why does that exist? Like, why is it taboo to start to talk about a lot of this information that's attached to something much deeper, like inside a lot of the individuals, inside the psyche of people, that will be broken down in the future by, like, leading psychologists and all this other shit. In the near future, you're going to have these leading psychologists and all these university people out there breaking down how white supremacy and etc. Has affected the human condition or the human consciousness or the evolution of this experience outside, like how the entire system has affected us. This is how they're going to science the shit out of it and make people love this shit. This is how, like I've been saying in previous videos, they got to science the shit out of it to make you like really vest yourself in it, like really put your whole, like, make dreams out of this shit. Like, you have dreams about being at work, like how fucked up that is. So your dreams of life, you have dreams of being in their universe that they've generated for you. So now that you've generated dreams in their universe, now you're a character in their universe, just like you're a character in at work in your dream. So that's what I'm saying. You get the ping all the time of the angry black man, and then people don't even want to talk about that because it's too, like, touchy. People don't even want to even address it. But what I'm saying is that, no, you know, break it down. You can talk about that. It's a lot easier when you talk about that and how it exists and all that other shit. So if you're going to talk about the angry black man, talk about why there's also an overly nice and concerned white man. And then work your way back to why there's a white and a black thing that exists in the first place. Like, what the fuck, like, are these words? There is no white, like, this whole thing of white was an invention. And then, you know, keep tracing it back all the way back. and then disassembling colonialism, and etc. Because this stuff exists in the language, this stuff exists in your relationships, like even in when the interracial relationship discussion. So there's this whole thing about like empowering your culture and your people with marrying like a black man marrying a black woman, and some being very off with a black man being with a white woman. Psychologically, like there's something that hasn't even been discussed. People don't even want to talk about the storyline of that. Like that doesn't even want to be discussed. So that goes along with this whole we're all human, we're all one, that we should just unify thing. That's what I'm saying is very dangerous to not break down and get into. And what's part of that is to beat down on the so-called black woman. The overemphasis on the white woman is also out there, but it's also this whole like white women or black men are more attracted to white women than they are black women. Like this is the underhandedly pushed agenda in the mainstream media. This is to backhandedly beat down on the so-called black woman the way they overtly do it with the characters that they portray in Hollywood. So within the way you have relationships or perceive your relationships is the biggest, like that's the how and the why consciousness. We get consumed with talking about how was her name? Leslie Jones on Saturday Night Live gets the shitty character in the Ghostbusters and the shitty Ghostbusters all women's cast. Like that whole thing, like everybody else is a scientist and she's just this simpleton like train worker or something like that. Like so this is an attack on the people. That's not a thing that just a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. It's a real thing that has a psychological intent. And still to this day, these so-called truthers don't even want to talk about this. How much information, how many chapters of videos could you make or breakdowns could you make of how this is existing and has been existing over the years? But a lot of the times people don't even want to, they can't even acknowledge that this exists because a lot of their personal belief systems are vested in not engaging or investigating that information. So this is that whole, like Alex Jones talking about make America great again. And his timeline, his historical timeline starts at 1776. His greatness of human greatness starts at 1776. The same thing with Joe Rogan. These are all buddies. They're the same thing. Owen Benjamin. They're all the same consciousness. We never really challenge ourselves to addressing the how and the why. So yeah, kind of lost my train of thought. There was something else that I was talking about, but yeah. Damn it, what the hell was that? I was talking about the overly nice white guy consciousness, how that's gentrification, colonialism. It's in your university system. This is why, when people mention the whole like having white teachers in a predominantly so-called black neighborhood, it's part of a supremacy mentality. Like this stuff just, oh, come on, get out of here. When that's what happens, when that's brought up, or it's not brought up, when it's ignored, that's what people are saying. Oh, that doesn't even matter. And then the whole thing with like the 70% of Planned Parenthoods being installed into inner cities. It's like, no, it's not like that. That's a depopulation construct that exists on purpose. This is why only now are you talking about, like, look at all the millions and millions of people, or the millions and millions of abortions that have happened as a result of Planned Parenthoods being put in inner cities as part of the depopulation program. Look how those numbers would have affected the not growing numbers of so-called white people today. Look how those numbers would have been affected if Planned Parenthood weren't installed by the Bill Gates vaccine community. That whole Margaret Sanger community. So, this is how all this stuff connects, and it's hidden by the niceties. It's like, oh yeah, what do you mean you don't like this? Like, this is this same construct where people say, oh, you're on a computer right now. What do you mean technology is a bad thing, or it's connected to? Oh, what do you mean? Aren't you on it? It's that same thing. So they're creating an atmosphere where people rationalize their own enslavement. So what do you mean you don't like slavery? Oh, I love being able to drive in my chains and my chains to I drive through McDonald's and, you know, stick my, you know, handcuffed hands out of the window and get my drive-through meal. You can't do that in other countries. This is the first world, baby. They don't give a fuck about the third world countries that they had to step on to get there. And the first world is not even that great at all. In fact, it's anti-great. It's fucked up. It's completely destructive on every level, the soul, the mind, and the body. Every layer of the individual that is a bird that is being birthed out of this system is a total, like a broken shell of a being that shouldn't even, you know, be, like the discussion isn't even reaching into, the divine ethers. Like, it's just this protoplasmic, like this just blob of shit that's just barely making it. That's what this experience is doing with the people. And then it makes it more complex when they get these like goofy assholes on here discussing it, like, oh, I'm so intelligent, like, oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about, aliens and Sasquatch and Area 51 and and Joe Rogan, you have 40,000 people listening to it. Oh yeah, I'm like, what do you think over there, guy? Oh yeah, flat. This guy mentions flat Earth too. So they just stand. This is why they have these videos back there to bounce back and forth for you to believe that what I say, that overly nice and concerned man. This is who they are. So it's the cool guy. It's like the Saved by the Bell. Like, if you really want to know what white supremacy is about, look at Saved by the Bell, that television show. That's something that for a few years and in my childhood I was watching, and it wasn't until later on I was like, this is some fucked up stuff, man. This is really, really messed up. To be, yeah. So anyway, let's see, UFO. Oh, so this is where the extraterrestrial UFO stuff fits in, and there's a lot of people, a lot of old school teachers, Dr. Delbert Blair, Dr. Phil Valentine, Dr. Bobby Hemmett. People asking about books and stuff like that. Check out a lot of their stuff and a lot of the books that they recommend, and I haven't even gone into a lot of stuff that they've read yet, but some of those teachers can give you some interesting places to go research and see where a lot of this stuff comes from. But they've broken down a lot of this, a lot of this stuff has already been broken down and laid out in many different ways. And it just needs to be kind of like brought back to the surface without any of the old school attachments. These old school attachments are limiting the way we can perceive a lot of this stuff. This stuff that weighs us down. I'm not saying like anything old school is an attachment. I'm just saying like once we start shifting, like for the example of shifting from the who to the what consciousness into the how and the why consciousness, there's a way to do that on a macro level where you get from the first two, the who and the what, and shift to the how and the why, kind of like actively engaging the conversation from a how and a why perspective, starting there. I don't really think we've gotten there. We haven't gotten there yet. Like, some people know what I'm talking about. The conversation hasn't gotten there. You can see the shift. Like, think of it as like a gear shifting from who to the what, and then them connected too, because that's another web too, like like a transmission in a vehicle or something like that. There's a vehicle shifting in the motor and a shifting in the transmission gears, and like the whole combustion and the movement and that whole thing. So you have I lost my train of thought, but you know what I'm talking about. I think it's cool to kind of end it on that. But yeah, you have the shifting. You have the shifting from the shifting from the who and the what, or who into the what, and then the who what consciousness, but also shifting out of that, because that's kind of like how I shifted from like asking the system to change or yelling at the system to change, instead of approaching the system from it being running exactly the way it's supposed to be doing. Like, it's on purpose. So now that we know that they don't give a fuck about us on every level, where a lot of people have been telling us this, so now what? Where does our power come from? Well, it exists outside of the power system. So that was like an example, loosely, me shifting from realizing, basing my perspectives only on the psychological and the physical warfare, now shifting into interpreting and being aware of the spiritual warfare at the same time. So if you're into the depths of the spiritual warfare, you're not going to be wasting your energy and your time yelling at an illusory power authority system in the first place. You're going to upgrade your approach to the system and really start to affect things on a bigger kind of frequency, a larger, more impactful frequency. So that can be seen and compared to shifting from, like I said, the psychological warfare into the spiritual warfare, but you also have like the physical warfare is included in that. But so you see how this is all like interchangeable, but the point is you're shifting from one energy of consciousness to another. So I'm saying there is an energetic shift of consciousness when you get out of the who and the what consciousness. Like, what's going on? Like because what is going on is still being controlled by the who motherfuckers that are out there telling you what to think about and how to think about that stuff and why you should think about that stuff. So you're still getting that's why the what consciousness largely overall on a macro scale is still limited by the who. But once you break that code and don't get consumed by this, like the stories Joe Rogan is talking about, like those are two different things. You have Joe Rogan, the belief system of Joe Rogan, and then you have the stories that he's talking about too. So same thing here, the what and the who. But once you break that, then you start to realize, oh, you're no longer just asking how and why about Joe Rogan. You're asking how and why about the consciousness that Joe Rogan is existing within. Like the English accent of the Planet Earth documentaries, the how and the why of that, rather than the intricacies of David Attenborough and the so-called white supremacy program. Like, it's more complex than that. It's not as micro, and it's more macro. It's not lacking or separated from that micro. It's just more and more inclusive of that micro in the macro. So once you break out of that, you go from that who and what consciousness into that how and why. That is how I've been explaining the shifting, a very loose kind of example of shifting into like a critical thought consciousness. Like being able to think for yourself to some degree, like some level of being able to think for yourself. And like I said, this is in having broken down in a lot of the old systems that are designed to think for you. Like the university system, the education system is designed to think for you. That's why it exists in the first place. So once you turn the majority of those systems off, then you can start to critically think for yourself. What is that? And what is that feeling? What is that, what does that taste like? What does it feel like? What does it smell like? Was it over so many years? What does that mean? And we're only getting in the first chapters of that. We're only getting into the beginnings of that. But we'll get there a lot quicker. I want to emphasize before I close this video out. We'll get there a lot quicker once we start breaking away from these anti-expansion of consciousness empire protectors like Joe Rogan and his old lackey crew that's out there too. I'll include Donnell Rawlings in that list too, because he hasn't. He's coming up with this whole podcast thing, and I wanted to expand upon this coming up soon, because maybe I'll do this in my own video. But that whole crew is already starting in a space of having to explain itself. So if like Donnell Rawlings, his next podcast coming out, he's asking about like, do I interview people? Do I do all this other stuff? So we're gonna see there's gonna be some kind of shift in the information world, specifically around like podcasts and stuff like that. Joe Rogan's gonna fall off of that. Like his crown is he's gonna be dethroned on purpose too, because he's on too on blast. So Donnell Rawlings getting pushed by a Dave Chappelle produced Netflix comedy special along with a Joe Rogan produced podcast is designed to change the dialogue, to affect the narrative, to control the narrative. So we'll see how the narrative gets controlled, but my point is, don't wait for that. Like, start to explain what's going on, break this stuff down for yourself, because the more complex the system gets, the more believable it gets for people who are just, still sitting on the fence, really just kind of letting the world think for them. So I'll leave it there. Thank you for the support. And until next time, from all my relations, peace, love, and harmony.